fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
I stared at the crumbling ruins before us, my mind reeling from the revelation that had just dropped like a stone into still waters. The man walking beside me, no, not just a man, a king, had just unveiled a truth that shifted the very ground beneath my feet. "You asked earlier what this place is," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I glanced at him, taking in the way his broad shoulders seemed to slump under an invisible weight. "It's my kingdom. It was my kingdom." I watched as he bowed his head, a gesture of profound shame that made my heart clench in sympathy. We continued to walk the ancient cobblestones, our footsteps echoing in the eerie silence that had fallen over this once great city. As we moved deeper into the ruins, I found myself studying my companion more closely. His features, which I had previously thought merely handsome, now took on an air of regal bearing. The way he carried himself, even in his apparent despair, spoke of a man accustomed to power and authority. But what had happened here? What catastrophe had reduced this thriving kingdom to rubble and ash? I opened my mouth to ask, but the words died on my tongue as we rounded a corner. Before us stood the remains of a grand palace, its once majestic spires now broken and jagged against the sky. The sight stole my breath away, and I found myself reaching out to touch the rough stone of a nearby wall. "It was beautiful," I murmured, more to myself than to my companion. "What happened?" He didn't answer immediately, and when he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "War, betrayal, hubris." He paused, his gaze distant. "Take your pick. In the end, they all led to the same result." I turned to face him fully, my heart aching for the pain I saw etched into every line of his face. Without thinking, I reached out and placed my hand on his arm. He flinched at first, then relaxed slightly under my touch. "I'm sorry," I said softly, "for whatever happened here, for whatever you've lost." He looked down at me then, and I was struck by the intensity of his gaze. In those eyes, I saw a depth of emotion that both frightened and fascinated me. There was sorrow there, yes, but also a fierce determination that refused to be extinguished. "It's not your fault," he said, his voice gaining strength. "You couldn't have known. No one comes here anymore. They say the place is cursed." I shivered at his words, suddenly acutely aware of the oppressive atmosphere that hung over the ruins like a shroud. But even as fear crept into my heart, I found myself drawn to this man, to his story, to the mystery that surrounded him. "Who are you?" I asked, the question burning in my mind. Truly, I mean, not just the man I met on the road, but the king of this fallen kingdom. For a long moment he was silent. I could see him wrestling with some internal debate, his jaw clenching and unclenching as he considered his response. Finally, he spoke. "My name is Thuron," he said, the words heavy with significance, "and I am the last king of Eldoria." Eldoria, the name sent a thrill through me. I had heard whispers of this place in old tales, legends of a kingdom lost to time and war, but I had never dreamed it might still exist, hidden away from the world. As if sensing my thoughts, Thuron continued, "The kingdom you see before you is but a shadow of its former glory. Once, Eldoria was a beacon of prosperity and magic, a place where wonders beyond imagining were commonplace." He gestured to the ruins around us, and as he spoke, I found myself seeing them not as they were now, but as they might have been in their prime. Grand buildings of white marble, bustling marketplaces filled with exotic goods, gardens overflowing with flowers that bloomed in every color of the rainbow. "But power breeds envy," Thuron went on, his voice growing harder, "and magic attracts those who would misuse it. We were betrayed from within, our defenses turned against us by those we had trusted most." I listened in rapt attention as he spoke of the fall of Eldoria, of the desperate battles fought to save his people, of the heartbreaking decisions that had led to the kingdom's ultimate destruction. With each word, I felt myself drawn deeper into his story, into his pain. When he finally fell silent, I found myself at a loss for words. What could I possibly say to comfort a man who had lost everything? Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I stepped closer to him, closing the distance between us until I could feel the heat of his body. Without hesitation, I wrapped my arms around him, pulling him into an embrace. For a moment he was stiff in my arms, but then, slowly, he relaxed. I felt his arms come up to encircle me, holding me tightly against him as if I were a lifeline in a storm-tossed sea. We stood like that for a long time, two lost souls finding solace in each other's presence. I breathed in the scent of him, leather and steel and something uniquely Thuron, and felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This was where I was meant to be, here in the arms of this broken king. Finally, Thuron pulled back slightly, just enough to look down at me. In the fading light, I could see the tears glistening in his eyes, tears he had clearly been fighting to hold back. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I haven't let myself grieve, not until now." I reached up, my fingers gentle as I wiped away the tears from his cheeks. "You don't have to be strong all the time," I told him. "It's okay to feel, to mourn what you've lost." He nodded, a single tear escaping to roll down his face. "I know, but I can't afford to wallow. There are things I must do, decisions I must make." I felt a chill at his words, a sense that there was much more to Thuron's story than he had revealed. "What kind of decisions?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment he didn't answer, then slowly he released me and stepped back. "Come," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "There's something I need to show you, something that might change everything." Curiosity and a hint of trepidation warred within me as I followed him through the ruins. We walked for what felt like miles, deeper and deeper into the heart of the dead city. The sun had long since set, and the only light came from the stars overhead and the occasional flicker of bioluminescent plants that grew in the cracks of the ancient stones. Finally, we came to a massive structure that had once been a temple, its domed roof partially collapsed but still standing. Thuron approached the entrance, his steps sure despite the darkness. I followed close behind, my heart pounding with anticipation. Inside, the temple was even more impressive. Pillars rose to the ceiling, their surfaces covered in intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story I couldn't quite decipher. At the center of the room stood an altar of some kind, its surface covered in dust and debris. Thuron walked to the altar and knelt before it, his head bowed in reverence. I hesitated, unsure if I should follow, but something in his posture compelled me forward. I approached the altar and knelt beside him, mirroring his pose. For a long moment we remained like that, silent and still. Then Thuron reached out and placed his hand on the altar's surface. As he did, the entire temple seemed to come alive. The carvings on the pillars began to glow with a soft, ethereal light, and a low hum filled the air, resonating in my bones. "What is this place?" I breathed, awestruck by the sudden transformation. "This," Thuron said, his voice filled with wonder, "is the heart of Eldoria's magic, the source of our power." As he spoke, the altar began to glow brighter, and I saw symbols I didn't recognize appear on its surface. Thuron's eyes widened, and he looked at me with a mixture of shock and hope. "It's reacting to you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The magic, it's never done this before." I stared at him in confusion. "What do you mean, I don't have any magic?" But even as I said it, I felt a strange sensation building within me, a warmth that started in my chest and spread outward. The symbols on the altar seemed to call to me, and before I knew what I was doing, I found myself reaching out to touch them. The moment my fingers made contact with the glowing surface, a surge of energy rushed through me. I gasped, my eyes flying wide as visions flashed through my mind, of Eldoria in its prime, of Thuron as he must have been before the fall, of a future that could be. When the visions finally faded, I found myself on my back, staring up at the glowing ceiling. Thuron knelt beside me, his face a mask of concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hand hovering over me as if afraid to touch. I nodded slowly, still reeling from the experience. I think so. What was that?" He helped me to sit up, his touch gentle but sure. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think you might be the key to restoring Eldoria, to bringing it back from the brink of oblivion." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process his words. "Me, but I'm nobody. I don't have any special powers or abilities." "You're wrong," Thuron said firmly. "The magic recognized you. It chose you. That means you have a connection to this place, to its power that I've never seen before." I swallowed hard, fear and excitement warring within me. "What does that mean for us, for you?" Thuron's expression grew serious, his eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "It means," he said slowly, "that you might be the one person who can help me rebuild Eldoria, to take back what was stolen from us and create something new, something stronger." The weight of his words settled over me like a physical presence. I thought of the life I had left behind, the simple existence I had been living before fate had thrown me together with this mysterious king. Could I really be the key to something so much bigger than myself? As if sensing my hesitation, Thuron reached out and took my hands in his. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said softly, "and I would never force you into this, but if you're willing, if you'll stand with me, I believe we can change the fate of this kingdom, of this entire world." I looked into his eyes, seeing the hope and fear and desperate need reflected there. In that moment, I knew that regardless of whatever power might or might not lie within me, I couldn't turn my back on this man, on this cause. Slowly I nodded. "All right," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll help you. I'll stand with you." A smile broke across Thuron's face then, brilliant and beautiful in its intensity. He pulled me into his arms, holding me close as if he never intended to let go. "Thank you," he whispered into my hair. "You won't regret this, I swear it." As we knelt there in the heart of the ancient temple, surrounded by the magic of a long-dead kingdom, I felt a sense of purpose settle over me that I had never known before. The path ahead would undoubtedly be difficult, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was meant to be. With Thuron in Eldoria, fighting for a future that once seemed impossible.